The History of Royal Arch Freemasonry, Part 1. Andrew Michael Ramsay, born in Scotland in 1668, went to Europe in 1710 to study, was a member of several societies. He wrote on Freemasonry in the early 1700s, and he influenced it with his belief that it came from Palestine and the Crusades. He was instrumental connecting Freemasonry to religion and knighthood rather than architecture. Ramsay constructed the first Masonic system, which was called the Rite of Ramsay. It consisted of 6 degrees: the Inner Apprentice, Fellow Craft, Master Mason, the Scottish Master, Novice, and the Knight of the Temple or Templar. It is the 4th degree which is responsible for the origin of the Royal Arch degree. Ramsay went to England in 1728, and he was unsuccessful in getting his degree system widely accepted. However, during the same time, Dr. Joseph Theophilus de Sauglier was constructing the Masonic ritual, and he was instrumental in changing the 3rd degree, which was previously about the death of Noah and the attempt by his sons to retrieve a lost word. And he transformed this version into the current version we know, featuring Hiram Abiff. It is felt that Ramsay's association with de Sauglier led to de Sauglier's creating the Royal Arch degree by using his Scottish Master degree as a basis. His Scottish Master degree roughly tells the story of the Vault of Enoch and has been transformed now into what we know as the 13th degree in both jurisdictions of the Scottish Rite. We feel that de Sauglier was possibly the author of the Royal Arch degree based upon the ritual containing similar language to the 3rd degree, poetic elements, and references to Newtonian language which de Sauglier used extensively. However, no one knows who invented the degree. The Royal Arch ritual continues the theme of rebuilding King Solomon's temple under Zerubbabel and the search for lost knowledge within the temple ruins. The ritual reveals a number of lost artifacts set within the keystones of 3 arches in the temple. These artifacts were lost in the destruction of the original temple, but with their discovery, the temple could be reconstructed, the divine measurements of God being found to recreate the most sacred holy place on earth. However, the allegorical symbol of recovery of the lost word made some aware in the fraternity that the symbolism of the 3rd degree was left wanting. Early Masonic scholars felt that there was a need to complete the circle of symbology. By 1738, some brothers began manipulating the Master Mason's degree, adding into it the elements of the Royal Arch degree and the recovery of the word. The first verifiable appearance of Royal Arch Masonry is in Ireland in the 1740s, during a procession in Dublin, in which there is a mention of 2 excellent masters carrying a Royal Arch that occurred on December 27, 1743. The degree is also mentioned in a work about Freemasonry in Ireland in 1744. Separate notes in this work indicate that the rite was being practiced in London, York, and in Dublin. In 1749, the Grand Lodge of Ireland issued warrants to Lodges 190 and 198 to establish Royal Arch Lodges. In 1751, we see the formation of the ancient Grand Lodge of England, which was due in part to the schism which began in 1738 regarding the recovery of the lost word. They were opposed by the original Grand Lodge, which was formed in 1717, who then became known as the Moderns. In 1746, Lawrence Dermot, who later would become the Grand Secretary of the Ancients, had been accepted to a Royal Arch chapter in Dublin, which was open at that time to those who had previously served as master of their craft lodge. He regarded the 4th degree of craft masonry to be the Royal Arch degree. In 1764, a lodge of Scottish Masons switched their loyalty to the modern Grand Lodge from the ancients, And then in the next year that followed, they assisted with setting up a Royal Arch chapter, which began admitting Masons from other modern craft lodges. What followed in 1766 was that the Moderns had formed the first Grand Royal Arch chapter. In 1744, the Ancients formed their own Royal Arch Grand Chapter at the assistance of Dermot. By the end of the 18th century, both Grand Lodges had developed a different organizational approach to the Royal Arch. While the Grand Chapter of the Moderns was independent from their craft Grand Lodge out of necessity, the Grand Chapter of the Ancients was closely tied to the corresponding craft Grand Lodge. For the Masons organized in the Ancients, the Royal Arch became recognized as the fourth degree, open to those who had served as master of a craft lodge. For the Ancients, the Grand Chapter was little more than a cipher, which was registering names and processing the admission fees. Effective governance of the Royal Arch degree rested within the Grand Lodge and the individual craft lodges that worked it as a fourth degree. At the beginning of the 19th century, when the Ancients and Moderns moved towards union, the role and purpose of the Royal Arch became a sticking point. The Ancients viewed the Royal Arch as a fourth degree of craft Freemasonry and worked it as part of their craft ceremonies, while the Moderns almost totally ignored it. The latter held the opinion that craft Freemasonry consisted only of 3 degrees, and that this Royal Arch degree was an extension of the third, which was to be administered separately. In addition, the Moderns embedded certain teachings into the third degree ritual that the Ancients only revealed to those joining the Royal Arch. In 1813, the Ancients and Moderns agreed on the Act of Union and formed the United Grand Lodge of England. This was possible only after reaching compromise on the role and the purpose of Royal Arch Masonry. The compromise was that after the Union, the Royal Arch degree would become fully recognized by the United Grand Lodge to placate the Ancients, but it would become a separate order to placate the Moderns. While all ancient craft lodges would be given sanction to work the ceremony to placate the Ancients. At the same time, no compromise could be reached on the role and purpose of Mark degree. It was effectively proscribed from the Union until the late 1850s, until it became organized in an independent Grand Lodge of Mark Master Masons of England and Wales. In most countries outside of England and Wales, however, the Mark Masonry had become attached to the Royal Arch chapters. And in its Book of Constitutions, the United Grand Lodge of England therefore declared that pure ancient Masonry consists of 3 degrees and no more, viz. Of those of the entered apprentice, the fellow craft, and the master mason, including the supreme order of the Royal Arch. In 1817, 4 years after the Ancients and Moderns had united their craft Grand Lodges, the new United Grand Lodge oversaw the formation of a Supreme Grand Chapter of Royal Arch Masons of England to govern the Royal Arch in England and Wales. By that time, the Grand Chapter of the Ancients had effectively ceased to exist. Only a few meetings were recorded for the time after 1813. So their remaining members were simply absorbed into what had previously been the Grand Chapter of the Moderns. Another significant constitutional development in English Royal Arch Masonry occurred in 1823. When Master Masons were allowed to join Royal Arch chapters without previously passed through the chair of the craft lodges. In 1835, the ritual was reformed when part of the ceremony known as passing in veils was dropped. This was readopted by Bristol chapters at the turn of the 18th century. In our next educational piece, we will review the history of the Royal Arch in the United States.